Autumn doesn't just bring falling leaves, it awakens what sleeps beneath the soil. 5 true nightmares where harvest festivals became feeding grounds. A scarecrow that blinks, forests whispering names in dead languages, cornfields hiding skin-hungry entities, leaf piles concealing buried watchers, and a bell that summons what should stay forgotten. Did you check what's hiding in your leaf pile this year?
Scarecrow That Watches. In the fall of 2006, in a quiet farming town in southern Pennsylvania, a seasonal corn maze was erected on the outskirts of an old family-owned farm. It was a tradition every October, drawing tourists and locals alike with cider, pumpkin picking, and Halloween festivities. But that year was different. That year, the fields were dry, the stalks brittle, and the air smelled faintly of mildew, even on crisp mornings. The Carter family, who ran the maze, had passed the tradition down through generations. But the patriarch, Earl Carter, had grown ill, and the responsibility fell to his 2 grandchildren, Mark and Ellie, both in their early 20s. They were determined to carry on the family name and make the maze the best yet. That October, they decided to add a new attraction. A lifelike scarecrow, hand-sewn from weathered burlap, stuffed with straw, and dressed in a moth-eaten flannel and jeans. Its head was an old feed sack stitched into a grotesque grin with large black buttons for eyes. Ellie joked that it was too creepy. "It looks like it's watching you," she said. They placed it at the center of the maze, high on a wooden stake, arms stretched wide. Visitors loved it. At first, the first sign that something was wrong came from a child, maybe 6 years old, who screamed when he saw the scarecrow. "It blinked at me," he cried. "It moved its head." The parents laughed it off. Mark and Ellie did too. But then, one by one, visitors began reporting strange experiences. Whispers in the maze, shadows following them around corners. One teenage girl claimed she heard the scarecrow calling her name, even though no one knew who she was. The maze wasn't huge, but people began getting lost inside for much longer than they should have. One woman wandered in for over an hour. When they found her, she was sitting at the base of the scarecrow's post, whispering to it, eyes vacant. She couldn't remember how she got there. A week later, another visitor, an older man, disappeared entirely. His car was found in the parking lot. No one had seen him leave. His last known location, inside the maze, near the scarecrow. Ellie wanted to shut it down. She said the scarecrow gave her chills. Mark brushed it off as stress and local superstition. Then came the night he stayed after closing to take down some decorations. Ellie had gone home. The sky was black, and the maze rustled in the wind. Mark had a flashlight, a thermos of coffee, and a playlist to keep him company. He made it halfway through the maze when the music stopped. His phone went dead. So did the flashlight. The wind died. In the silence, he heard something. Not rustling, not footsteps. Breathing. Heavy, raspy. Just beyond the rows of corn. He spun, called out. Nothing. Then his eyes adjusted. Ahead, barely visible. The scarecrow. It wasn't where it was supposed to be. It was closer. Standing, Mark ran. Through rows and rows of corn. He swore he could hear footsteps behind him, matching his own, then outpacing them. When he burst out of the maze, the lights on the property were flickering. The scarecrow was gone. The next morning, he told Ellie everything. They returned to the center of the maze together. The stake was still there, but it had been snapped in half, splinters scattered like bones. No sign of the Scarecrow. That afternoon, Earl Carter, the old patriarch, passed away in his sleep. After the funeral, they decided to shut the maze down early for the season. But one night, Ellie went to the barn to put away some tools. Inside, she found footprints, barefoot, straw scattered in clumps, and in the far corner, standing perfectly still, the Scarecrow. She screamed. Mark came running. When they turned the lights back on, it was gone. They locked the barn and called the sheriff. No sign of a break-in. They burned the Scarecrow a week later, watched it go up in flames in the middle of the field. The wind howled. The fire danced high. For a while, that seemed to be the end. But every October since, someone reports seeing the same Scarecrow lurking near the edge of the now abandoned Carter maze. Never moving, but never in the same place twice. Sometimes it's by the road, sometimes deep in the corn, sometimes standing just outside a bedroom window, watching, waiting. The Oak Hollow whispers. In the heart of Vermont, nestled between hills painted in crimson and gold, sits a forgotten road known as Oak Hollow Lane. The trees here are ancient, tall oaks with twisted limbs and roots that ripple through the cracked asphalt. The lane, which once connected two thriving farming communities, has long since fallen into disrepair. Locals call it cursed. They say the leaves never fall naturally on Oak Hollow Lane. Instead, they hang suspended in midair, drifting without ever touching the ground, like they're waiting. Few travel the lane now. Most GPS maps have erased it entirely. But every autumn, someone finds their way there, and not everyone returns. In 2014, a group of hikers, 3 college friends from Boston, arrived in town looking for color trails and rural charm. They checked into a small bed and breakfast run by an elderly woman named Marlene, who warned them, avoid the hollow, especially at dusk. The trees, they remember. They laughed it off, thinking it was local folklore. The next morning, they hit the trail and eventually found a path that wasn't marked on their map. A crumbling sign lay hidden beneath the brush. Barely legible, it read, Oak Hollow. Naturally, they followed it. The road stretched on for miles, winding between dense groves of oak trees. The sun filtered through amber leaves, painting everything gold. It was beautiful, enchanting, until it wasn't. As the day faded, the forest grew quiet. Too quiet. The birds stopped singing. The wind stilled. And one of the hikers, Devin, paused. Do you hear that? At first, they didn't. But then it came. A whispering. Dozens of faint, unintelligible voices murmuring from the trees. They looked around. They looked around. No one was there. They picked up their pace. The whispers followed, one by one. They began feeling disoriented. Claire, the most rational of the group, suddenly became convinced they were walking in circles. Jacob swore he saw someone moving between the trees. They marked a tree with their pocket knife. 15 minutes later, they passed the same tree again. The mark had deepened. Fresh. That's when they realized the forest was shifting. Panic set in. They turned back, only to find the trail behind them was gone, swallowed by dense growth. That's when Claire vanished. They turned a corner and she was simply gone. No scream, no struggle, no footprints, just fallen leaves, hanging in the air. Devin and Jacob shouted her name. No response, just the trees, whispering. They stumbled upon an old cabin not far from the trail. rotting and sunken into the ground. With night closing in, they had no choice but to take shelter. Inside was dark, damp. The fireplace crumbled, the floor soft with rot. In the back corner was a chair. On it sat a bundle of dried oak leaves tied with the twine. When Devin picked it up, he found a photo beneath it, black and white, faded. It showed a group of people standing in the same forest. One of them looked like Claire. The air grew heavy. The leaves outside began to rise, floating, swirling, as if pulled upward by an invisible force. The whispers returned, louder now, angrier. Jacob panicked. He ran into the trees, screaming Claire's name. Devin chased after him, but stopped short when he saw it. A massive oak tree, gnarled and ancient, stood in a clearing. Around its base were dozens of bundles, like the one in the cabin, each with photos beneath them. Photos of people, all of them recent, all of them missing, including Jacob. Devin backed away slowly, but the leaves turned violent, whipping around him like blades. He covered his face, ran blindly through the woods, following the sound of the whispering, which somehow became a kind of guide, leading him back to the road. He emerged just as the sun cracked over the horizon, bloodied, shaking, alone. Devin was found by local rangers 2 days later, wandering near the main road. He couldn't remember how he got out. He was dehydrated, rambling about talking trees and photos in the leaves. Claire and Jacob were never found. To this day, hikers report hearing soft whispers near Oak Hollow. Some say the forest shifts when no one is looking. Others claim to see photos hanging from the trees, bound in bundles of oak. And every fall, someone disappears, just like the leaves that never touch the ground. The Red Scarecrow. In the rural outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina, there's a remote farmstead that hasn't been lived in for decades. Surrounded by rolling hills and dying cornfields, the property is known by locals as Old Marlowe's Place. The legend begins in the 1970s, when a single mother named June Whitaker moved into the house with her 6-year-old son, Eli. She wanted a quieter life, away from city noise. The price was right, the land was plentiful, and the farmhouse had character. What it also had was a scarecrow, tall, thin, straw-stuffed, draped in a faded red flannel shirt and oversized hat. June thought it was quaint, until she tried to move it. It wouldn't budge. She called a neighbor to help. Together they tried to lift it. Nothing. The pole wouldn't even sway. It was like the earth had fused around it. Soon after, Eli began having nightmares. He told his mother the scarecrow moved at night, that it came to his window, just standing there, watching. June dismissed it as childish imagination. Then, one morning, she found small, muddy footprints leading from the cornfield to the back door. Not child-sized, not adult-sized either. Something in between. She thought it might be a stray dog, or a prank, until she found scratches on Eli's bedroom window. That October, the fields around the house started to die. Not just wilt, but blacken, rot, and collapse inward. Everything turned to mulch. Even the trees shed their leaves prematurely. The scarecrow remained, red shirt fluttering in windless silence. Neighbors stopped visiting. They said the place made their skin crawl. One elderly man, Mr. Reardon, warned her about the scarecrow. You leave it alone. Don't cut it down. Don't look it in the eyes. But that night, Eli told her. It blinks. June began to believe her son. Lights flickered. Shadows moved where there were no light sources. The smell of rotting corn hung thick in the air. And each night, Eli grew quieter, withdrawn. He stopped playing. He stopped eating. He began drawing pictures. They were always of the Scarecrow, towering, red, arms stretched wide, with people kneeling beneath it. One drawing showed Eli and June, with X's over their eyes. Things escalated. One night, June heard Eli talking in his sleep. She approached his room and found him sitting upright, eyes open, speaking in another language. She slapped him awake. He didn't remember anything. But the next morning, she found muddy straw on the floor by his bed. That afternoon, in desperation, she tried to tear down the Scarecrow. She brought an axe and began to swing, but the wood bounced off it like rubber. And for a brief second, she swore it turned its head toward her. She fell backward. When she opened her eyes, it was still facing forward. But something had changed. The red shirt wasn't faded anymore. It looked new, wet. Terrified, she decided to leave. She packed a single suitcase, grabbed Eli, and headed for the car. The keys were missing, Eli said. It won't let us go. That night, the wind howled. The Scarecrow remained still, but the entire cornfield moved around it, writhing like snakes in the moonlight. June bolted the doors, covered the windows, and sat with Eli in her arms. Just before dawn, she fell asleep, and when she woke up, Eli was gone. Police searched for days. No signs, no struggle, no footprints. June was found wandering the woods, barefoot, mumbling about, eyes in the red flannel. She was institutionalized shortly after. Her mind had snapped. To this day, no one dares set foot on old Marlowe's farm, but every fall, hikers report a strange figure on the hill, tall, unmoving, in a red shirt, standing above a blackened cornfield. And some say if you get too close, you'll see two small hands wrapped around its leg, as if it's holding someone tightly. The Man in the Leaves. Every fall, the quiet town of Larkspur Hollow transforms into a postcard of autumnal beauty. Trees explode in hues of orange, red, and gold. Children leap into leaf piles. The air is crisp, and neighbors share warm cider on their porches. But there's one part of town that locals avoid once the first leaf falls. Old Finch Trail, a winding path behind the elementary school that leads into the dense woods. The town calls it the fall line because the leaves there never quite look right. They're too dark, too brittle, and they fall faster than anywhere else. The legend, passed down through hushed whispers, speaks of a man who lives beneath the leaves. He doesn't walk. He doesn't run. He waits. The story truly began one October, when a middle school janitor named Clint Hawthorne was assigned to clean up the area near the trail after reports of kids sneaking out there after school. Clint didn't believe in local ghost stories. He was a practical man. He thought the rumors were small-town paranoia. But that first afternoon, something strange happened. He heard whispers, not from behind him, not from around him, from beneath him, as though the soil itself was breathing out words. He dismissed it. Maybe it was the wind, but the next day, he found something that made his stomach knot. A perfect human outline imprinted into a massive pile of leaves, like someone had lain there for hours. Arms at their side, legs together, face up. He looked up, expecting to see a tree the leaves had fallen from, but there was nothing overhead. just open sky. That night he had a dream, if it could be called that. He was lying in the leaves, unable to move. Above him, shadows passed. A figure crouched beside him, its body blending perfectly with the forest floor. Its face was a swirling mess of leaves, bark, and black hollow eyes. It whispered, "Stay down, stay hidden." Clint jolted awake, heart racing. His feet were covered in dirt and leaves, despite never stepping outside. Over the next few days, things escalated. Children at the school reported seeing a man made of leaves near the trail. One boy said he waved at him. Another claimed he followed her home, but disappeared when she screamed. Clint started researching the area and found a chilling account from 1912. A series of disappearances in the woods during autumn, all traced to Finch Trail. The final entry was from a priest who wrote, "There is something under the earth here. It takes shape in the season of death. It mimics man, but it is not man." That same night, Clint saw it with his own eyes. He was walking home through the trail, flashlight in hand, when the beam caught something unusual, leaves rising from the ground unnaturally, floating in slow spirals. Then he saw it, a figure, standing motionless among the trees. It had no face, just a writhing mask of oak and ash leaves. Its limbs were lanky, and every time the wind blew, its body shifted like a pile of debris being held together by a curse. Clint ran, fast. Behind him he could hear the leaves following, not rustling, but crawling, like insects. He reported it to the sheriff, but was laughed off. "You're just hearing the wind." But the children weren't laughing. A week later, a student named Maya Graves vanished during recess. The only clue, her backpack found halfway down the trail, completely filled with leaves. Not one fingerprint, not one shoe print, just that eerie, dry crackle of old foliage. Clint tried to save her, armed with nothing but a rake, a flashlight, and a pocket Bible. He returned to the trail at sunset. The deeper he went, the quieter the world became. No birds, no wind, just silence, until he heard the breathing again, low, deep, right below his feet. He dug with the rake, tossed aside mounds of leaves, and then he found it. A hole, not dug, not natural, like the earth had been peeled open. Inside, he saw Maya, eyes wide, lips trembling, buried up to her neck. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then, just beside her, the man in the leaves began to rise. Clint dropped the rake and reached in. The ground fought him. The leaves bit at his arms, but he pulled Maya free and ran. He didn't stop running until he reached the school parking lot. The trail behind him collapsed inwards, like the forest was swallowing itself. Maya survived, but never spoke again. And Clint, he quit his job and moved out of town. But every fall when the first leaf touches the ground, he locks his doors and sleeps with the lights on, because he knows the man in the leaves is still waiting just beneath the surface. Harvest Bell. In the remote farming community of Red Hollow, nestled deep in the Appalachian foothills, autumn wasn't just a season, it was a ceremony. Every October, the townsfolk held an old festival called the Hollowing, rooted in ancient folklore brought over by their ancestors from Eastern Europe. The centerpiece of the festival was a massive iron bell, mounted atop a wooden tower in the middle of a field. They called it the Harvest Bell. It was only rung once a year on the final day of the harvest to ward off what grows in the dark. Most people thought it was just superstition, but there were rules never broken. Never be in the fields after the bell rings, never go near the bell tower at night, and never, ever answer if you hear your name whispered from the corn. When Sam Whitaker, a journalist from Charleston, arrived in Red Hollow to write a piece on quirky rural traditions, he thought it was all folklore nonsense. A few photos, a few interviews, a mention of the strange bell, easy paycheck. He was welcomed with polite smiles, but cold eyes. The townsfolk were guarded, tight-lipped, especially about the bell-keeper, a gaunt old man named Elias Crowder, who barely spoke and lived in a shack near the tower. On the day of the festival, Sam was allowed to observe. People wore hand-stitched robes with oak leaf patterns. Children carried lanterns carved from turnips, not pumpkins. At sunset, the bell was rung. The sound was deep, unnatural, less like metal, more like a moan from the earth. That night, the fields were abandoned, and Sam, ever the skeptic, went exploring. He brought his camera and flashlight and headed toward the tower, ignoring the warning looks he'd received. The cornfields around it were unusually tall, twice his height, dry and rustling with the faintest breeze, even though the air was still. He snapped pictures of the tower, circled it twice, then stepped back into the field. That's when he heard it. Sam. A child's voice. He froze. Who's there? Silence. Then again, softer. Sam. Come see the bell. He laughed nervously. Maybe a prank. Some kid from town messing with him. He turned to leave, only to find the path he came in on was gone. The corn had shifted. Now lost, Sam tried to retrace his steps. But the more he walked, the less sense the field made. The rows bent unnaturally, looping back on themselves. At one point, he stumbled onto a patch of burned stalks, perfectly blackened in a wide circle. At its center was a doll, handmade, dressed like the bell-keeper. The wind picked up. The stalks began to sway violently. And then he saw them, figures, tall, pale, featureless, with open mouths that didn't move. They didn't walk. They simply stood, watching, always in his peripheral vision. Every time he turned, they disappeared. He began to run, back at the tower. Elias Crowder stirred in his chair. He looked toward the fields and muttered something under his breath. He's in the rows. The bell is called. The next morning, the townsfolk found Sam's camera at the edge of the field. It was filled with photos. Most were blurry, but one taken moments before the final shot showed something chilling. Sam standing beside the bell, his mouth open in horror, and behind him, a figure tall and made of writhing corn husks and harvest twine, its head a withered gourd, split down the middle like a mouth. The final photo was pure blackness. No one saw Sam again, but every fall new stalks grow behind the tower where none had been planted. And some nights, if you walk past the tower just before dawn, you might hear the bell ring, softly, mournfully, not rung by human hands. And sometimes, if you're unlucky enough to be alone, the corn will whisper your name,